Yes.
Hey.
Good morning, Claire. How are you?
Hi, Jim. It's lovely to meet you finally, because we've been chatting a bit on Facebook, haven't we, through my fairy group that you're in, Fairy Group Whispering. Um, and you're talking to me from Pittsburgh in Pennsylvania, USA.
Indeed.
So yeah, thanks for getting up to chat with me. It's morning with you at the moment, isn't it?
Yes,
And
indeed. About 10 a.m.
yeah, and you're very talented because you're a recording artist and composer. And I've been listening to some of your wonderful music as well. So
So much.
yeah, really been enjoying that. And I've got you on the podcast today to talk about some orb experiences that you shared with me. And I just wanted to talk with you a bit more about them because they're really interesting. So, you mentioned an experience, you've had several, and I think the first one was when you were in your 20s,
Indeed.
right? Mm.
I had returned to my hometown of Waterford, Pennsylvania, which is up in the northwest corner of the state. After living in Los Angeles for about 4 years, I went to school there and was looking for opportunities in the recording industry and had a number of near misses, but things really hadn't worked out for me. So I returned back to my hometown of Waterford, and I asked my father to teach me his trade. He's a bricklayer, and I'd worked with him when I was in high school, of course. And I said, Dad, this is crazy work. I'm never going to do this. You're out of your minds. And after being out in the world for a few years, I realized that there were some very valuable lessons to be learned, and from my dad. And I also, excuse me, I really enjoyed being outside. And he said, okay, I'll teach you the trade, but it's going to take you about 5 years to master it. You have to promise me you'll work with me for that amount of time. And after that, you can do what you will. So I said, sure, I'll do that. And I've been working with him for several years. And one morning we were on our way to a job in the early pre-dawn hours. And we pulled up to a stop sign in a rural area near a sugar grove of maple trees that had belonged to my family in years past. My grandfather and my great grandfather both used to make maple syrup there. However, I believe during the Depression, they lost the property. So anyway, we pulled up to a stop sign near the maple grove, and in the distance, there were three balls of light very high in the sky that began to descend over the top of the maple trees towards us. And as we sat at the stop sign, they lined up sort of in a row in front of the windshield, and it was difficult to tell how far away they were. They could have been 50 yards, they could have been 100 yards, they could have been 10 feet. They were very clearly defined, very bright in the pre-dawn hours. And I had the impression that they were generating light and heat in another dimension, if you will. And
Mm.
out of my peripheral vision, I could see the reflection of a bright white light on the siding of a nearby building. And they seemed to study us for a while. I don't know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And then all of a sudden, they just kind of darted away
Mm.
in right, sharp right angles to each other, and disappeared. And at the time, my father was in his late 40s, and was a bricklayer, a man of the earth, not given to a lot of mystical types of experiences. And he looked at me and he said, "Jim, did you see that?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And he said, "Do you know what they were?" And I said, "I have no idea. I've never seen anything like that. I've never heard of anything like that before." I had no experience or knowledge of orbs of any kind, leading up to that event. And we both just kind of shook our heads and went to work. And I didn't really think too much of the experience at the time. I mean, I thought it was very unusual, very interesting, but I had no framework within which to put it.
Yeah.
And so maybe, I'm going to say maybe 2008, 2009, somewhere around there, I was watching the History Channel with my daughter, Erin, who was about 10 or 11 years old at that time. And they played some very startling footage from Oliver's Castle, which is in Wiltshire, I believe.
Yes.
It's there's quite a bit of controversy about the footage. It shows two orbs kind of circling a field, and as they're circling the field, a really lovely and intricate crop circle emerges below them.
Yes.
I'm sure you've seen that footage.
I have seen it. Yes, it's really fascinating.
Oh, it really is.
Yeah, it is.
As soon as I saw it, I immediately recognized the orbs. I said to Erin, those are exactly what my dad and I saw coming over the treetops, back when I was in my 20s. And I just was astonished, really, that my dad and I had actually seen those together. And I was seeing evidence that they're the very same thing that created those remarkable crop circles over the field in Wiltshire. And, I remarked on it to my daughter, and, I started looking up as much information as I could about orbs. Then we could fast forward to 2011. Well, I guess we should go back in time a little bit. About the time that I saw those orbs with my dad, which was late 70s, I had an opportunity to record an album of my original music for a small independent record label called Icarus Records. And they were appropriately named because unfortunately they crashed and burned before my album could ever be released, at the time. And they gave the tapes to me. I had all the artwork ready. I'd had a friend make some cover art. I had a couple other friends create art pieces, had done a bunch of photographs, had the album all ready for release. And Icarus called me up and said, "Unfortunately, we're bankrupt. We're not going to be able to release the recording." And I was very disappointed, but the recording did give me opportunities to write music for the theater. And I did a ballet for the Erie Bayfront Ballet Company, wrote a musical for Penn State Barron's Theater Department, which is actually how I met my wife. She was a theater major there and came in and auditioned for the show. And I cast her as the lead in the show, and she remains my leading lady to this day.
Oh, how lovely. Isn't that amazing that through that kind of happening, the record company going down, really it led to other things for you and led to your wife. It's amazing how these things happen, isn't it?
It is. And as that door was closed, many other ones opened up. So let's fast forward again to 2011. And I had met a man who was was also had done some recording, and I said, hey, I have this album of music. Would you like to check it out? He said, sure. So the technology had advanced to the point where I was able to create a CD off of the original recording. And I shared it with this guy whose name was Nate Sloss. And he said, wow, this is a really beautiful recording. People should hear it. Why don't you release it yourself? And I said, oh man, I'd love to do that, but I really don't know how. I don't know how it would be done. I don't have a label, and I'm not sure really how to go about it. And he said, well, there is a service called cdbaby.com where independent artists can release their own music for $36, and they'll distribute it worldwide. So I said, sure, let's do it. I got out all the old artwork for the show, or for the recording, and he photographed it for me. And he called me up and he said, Jim, there's some unusual things that have happened with the photographs. And I said, well, what do you mean, Nate? And he said, there are what appear to be orbs or discs that have shown up on the artwork that aren't part of the original art.
Gosh.
I said, isn't that interesting? And so he showed me, I don't know if you can see this. It looks.
Can't see it. I might. No.
Well, I have to get,
If you have a photo of it, oh, I can see it now. Yeah.
yes.
And there's.
You see the orb up in the middle of the sky there?
Yeah, it looks like the sun or the moon. Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. So here, I'll show you the original artwork. If we can see that. I guess.
It's a bit fuzzy. You could send me a photo of it and I could
put
it up. Yeah.
I'll send you a photo,
if you send me
photo of it.
A picture of them.
So anyway, that original art doesn't have that orb in it. And then there's also this orb that showed up. This is the artist's portrayal of Indian summer. There's this wonderful figure of like an indigenous type of person with leaves swirling around her. And again, the original art does not have any orb in it. The orb showed up in her hand as though she is dispensing summer to the world.
That's amazing.
So the music was all recorded in 1978 and 79, which is about the time we saw the orbs in the sky. And it's also right around the same time that the artwork was created for the album. So, I almost, I feel like it's sort of a blessing, if you will, from the angelic sources or from the Fae, but it struck me as so unusual that they would show up in the artwork, and I'm very grateful that they did show up, and I think it's kind of an unusual thing.
So just going back to that experience, so you saw the 3 orbs.
Yes.
And is there farmland in that area? I mean, are there crops in that area?
There are some open fields in that area as well. The grove of maple trees is, I don't know if it's still there or not. It was there in the 70s. And a big open field right beside it, which is now unfortunately a trailer park, but civilization moves on. But it was primarily a rural area, and I've just been doing some, I've been looking at work by a lady named Patty Greer. She talks about crop circles quite extensively and has spent a lot of time with them. I don't know if you're familiar with her at all.
I don't think I am. No, I'd like to read about her. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. She is, I think, one of the biggest crop circle experts in the world right now, having spent years out in the field in crop circles, photographing them, investigating them, researching them. And she knows a lot about these balls of plasma energy that are apparently what the orbs are composed of. And she seems to feel that they are sort of angelic. And
right. Yeah.
I know there's a church in Wiltshire, I believe it's St. John's Episcopal, and there is a beautiful mosaic of Uriel,
Yes.
Uriel, and in his hands he has a golden disc, and the photograph that I saw had an orb kind of etched into one corner of it, and I believe Uriel comes out of the north and is a patron of poets, and I feel like as though he may have had, he may be my patron, and that perhaps the orbs that I encountered with my father were angelic forces, and he may have helped inspire me to create that first album, Flower and Sword. And I just feel very, very close and attuned to him, if you will.
Wow, there's so much within that experience we can talk about. I mean, the fact that, I mean, I'm just wondering what was happening in your life at that time, that the orbs, you saw the orbs. Had anything happened before that experience, or happened immediately afterwards? Was it was your album coming about, was it after the, or before?
I had another very unusual experience around the same time. I was living on the shore of a small lake, Lake LaBeouf, which is outside of my hometown of Waterford, at a place called the Showboat Motel. It's a former dance hall that was turned into an apartment complex. And I had a small apartment on the lake shore with a big array of windows that looked out over the lake. And I really loved it there. I had no television or anything. The lake was, and the picture windows were my television, you know, if you will. And so I came home from work one day, and this was late November, and I looked out my window, and I saw a large brown pelican in my garden. I had a little garden underneath my window, and this pelican had a fishing line wrapped around its neck, and the fish hook was embedded in its neck, and it looked like it was in distress. And first of all, I was shocked to see a pelican in northwestern Pennsylvania, and I got up my bird book just to make sure that's what I was looking at. And yeah, it was a brown pelican. So I called up my friend Sam Stahl, who at the time and probably still is the leading birder in Pennsylvania, a member of the Audubon Society and extremely knowledgeable about birds. And I said, Sam, I think there's a brown pelican in my garden. And he said, no, there's not, Jim. He said, a pelican has never been seen in the state of Pennsylvania. And the chances of one being this far north and away from the ocean, he said, I don't think it's a pelican. I said, Sam, it's a pelican. It's big. You know, this is in the days before cell phones. I couldn't really take a photograph of it with a phone. I did snap a picture with my Kodak Brownie Instamatic, which I will send to you. I do have a picture of this pelican.
That'd be great.
So I said, Sam, you better come over, check it out. So he came over and brought about 10 or 12 members of the Audubon Society with him. And by then, the pelican had moved away from my garden. And there was an older gentleman who also lived at the showboat named Fred Kohler, who was a retired meat packer from Pittsburgh. He had retired up there. He fished every day. And he was flipping minnows to this pelican who was catching it in its beak, and it was able to swallow the minnows. They were small enough to get the constriction around its throat. I imagine that a fisherman had thrown some bait, and this pelican had grabbed it, and somehow the line got wrapped around its neck, and he pulled free, and somehow found his way to my garden. I have no idea how. And so I said, what do we do? And Sam said, well, we're all going to join hands and we'll circle the bird. We'll close in. And when he tries to fly, whoever he's closest to, wrap him up. We'll take him to the Glenwood Veterinary Hospital and they can attend to him. So we did that. We joined hands, closed in on this magnificent bird. It was big. And at the last minute, it flew, fortunately, right towards Sam, who had had some experience with this kind of rescue before. And he wrapped the bird up in his arms and took him into his truck. And he and his girlfriend at the time, who also happened to be the woman who made the painting of Indian Summer that has the disc in. She's an American artist and a dear friend of mine named Ada Ellis Anderson. And so she actually drove the pelican to the Glenwood Hospital. They removed the fishing line and the hook, but unfortunately, the bird did not survive. They were hoping he would live, and they were going to fly him back to Florida the next time the Erie Zoo had a shipment of animals going out. But unfortunately, he didn't make it. So several, I guess maybe 2 weeks later in December, I went into the Church of St. John the Baptist in Erie, Pennsylvania. My friend Pam Verity was the choir director there, and she would bring me in on the holidays sometimes to sing with the choir, play guitar. I also play trombone. And so I walked into her sanctuary, went up into the choir loft, and I looked down, and over one of the side altars, I saw a mosaic of a brown pelican, and it had 3 babies who were tearing its flesh, eating its flesh and drinking its blood. And my jaw just dropped. I said, Pam, what is a pelican doing in the Catholic Church? What do you know anything about it? And she said, no, I don't really. It's always been there. You have to ask the priest. So I talked to the priest, and he said that during the Middle Ages, the pelican became a symbol of Christ. And the people believe that in times of famine, the pelican would allow its babies to eat its flesh and drink its blood. And that was the source of this image. And he said, if you want to learn more about it, to pick up Carl Jung's book on symbols of the collective unconscious. I did. And sure enough, I found that the pelican is a Christ symbol, but I think it's probably a lot older than that. I think, like many symbols of the Christian church, it was probably appropriated from some pagan traditions. I don't really know exactly where. I do know that the great philosophical pelican is a symbol that is associated with alchemy and and the Philosopher's Stone. The Philosopher's Stone and the Great Philosophical Pelican are one and the same. So this was just a really powerful intrusion of a symbol from the collective unconscious into my life.
Yeah.
And really, it redirected me. At the time, I considered myself sort of a Buddhist, and it kind of redirected me into Christian mysticism. And I began to, I read The Way of the Pilgrim, which is a book about a monk who begins to practice the Jesus prayer, which is a very simple prayer. Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. And so I began to practice that prayer using some techniques I had learned from Nichiren Shoshu Buddhism. When I lived in LA, I had chanted Nam-myoho Renge-kyo with the Nichiren Shoshu Buddhist people, and it became sort of a prayer wheel that descended into my heart center. And I began practicing the Jesus prayer in the same way. And I attended an ecumenical service at a Methodist church one spring, Lenten time, and I felt sort of bad for Christ. The minister was using television shows, TV sitcoms for his message. The choir was out of tune. The organ sounded awful. I thought, is this the best we can do? I began to say the Jesus prayer as I sat in the pew, and the communion was passed around. And as I took the little piece of Wonder Bread into my hand, it looked like there was sort of white laser light emanating from it. And I took it into my mouth, went down into my heart area, and I just felt something beginning to change. And I had the same thing happen with the grape juice. I looked at it, looked like purple light, and the light went down into my heart center area, and I felt like a scab was being removed, and a door opened in my heart center, and I wasn't able to speak actually for about 3 days. And I had some very beautiful experiences in the natural world. I went out into the woods, and I felt as though I was inside of nature, inside of the trees, and they were inside of me. Animals and birds were no longer afraid of me. I was able to actually touch a groundhog. I had gone out for a run. I was an avid runner in those days, and there was a groundhog by the side of the road. And I just went up, and I felt like there was no difference between me and the natural world. So the experience lasted for about 3 days, and then it gradually kind of faded away. But my heart center has remained open, all these, and over time, I've had a number of experiences where flying creatures will just land on me, and animals and birds trust me in a way that most people don't experience. And I've come to believe all these experiences are kind of tied together. And we as humans have another way of sensing the world through our hearts that most of us don't really, we don't experience, because we've simply forgotten, and we haven't really developed this sensing. And it seems like recently a lot of people are having these kinds of experiences, and I think it's kind of a way that we may return to the garden, if you Garden of Eden. And I really
I really feel the same. I'm noticing the same. And
I thought you did. I thought you
yeah,
did.
when that's the conclusion I come to through my connecting with nature, in the unseen fairy realms, stuff that I feel I connect with. It's definitely through the heart. And that's the key to this connection on another level.
Did,
Oops, sorry. Yeah.
okay,
So,
got it. Um, I was very fond of butterflies and had a very large collection of butterflies, and I would just spend hours outdoors stalking them, chasing them, collecting
yeah.
them, following them, with my eyes, and they move very quickly. And I think it may have had an effect of sort of helping to reprogram my brain a little bit. I think we spend way too much time inside in our houses,
Yeah.
and I think the more time you spend in the natural world, the greater the opportunity to interact with the natural world and the natural world to interact with you.
Mm.
And I did have a number of odd illnesses as a child. I was sick quite a bit, and I've come to believe that it was they were shamanic illnesses that were uh, weakening my body in order to strengthen my spirit.
Mm.
And, we don't really talk about uh, shamanic experiences very much in our culture, and we don't really have a frame for them. I had pneumonia 12 times as a child, and I I missed
Gosh.
a huge amount of school, but I spent a lot of time drawing pictures, writing poems, writing songs, and I think they were. I think that time helped to give me a little different perspective on things, and uh, I don't really recall any remarkable metaphysical type of experiences other than synesthesia, which I still have to this day, where I experience visual things as sound and
Mm.
as feelings, like the
Yeah.
is the isness of an object is something that I feel inside of me rather than, I mean, I look at it, I see it, I experience it, but there's like another way of experiencing things that I had as a child. And I think all those illnesses and time away from school was good for me.
You
And
know, I'm smiling because I recognize your experience because I had a very similar experience growing up. And it's interesting to see it, hear it put in those terms as being a shamanic experience, initiation, because I had recurring tonsillitis.
mhm.
So I was off, and it was really bad to the point where I nearly died at one point with it because my temperature got so dangerously high. And
Did you
yeah.
when you were in that feverish state, did you have any interesting experiences?
Mm,
Do you
I
recall?
had, yeah, strange dreams, kind of felt a bit kind of out of body, not really in my body sort of
Right,
experiences.
like astral type of projection, perhaps.
Yeah, perhaps it was. Yeah. Very vivid dreams, very almost felt that the spirit world was very close.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, the Who
yeah,
has a song, "Sickness will surely take the mind where minds don't usually go. Come on the amazing journey and learn all you should know." And I think
yeah.
there's deep truth in that.
Mm.
I did have a severe head injury when I was 15 that really changed the course of my life. I was playing football, and I was really a pretty good athlete. I was the starting quarterback as a 10th grader. I don't. You're probably not familiar with
Mm,
American education, so to speak, but
yeah.
uh, anyway, I was hit by a couple of guys at the same time, knocked out, knocked unconscious, and began having a lot of unusual kind of neurological symptoms. And I ended up missing almost my entire sophomore year of school from the head injury. They didn't really have MRIs or anything at the time. Um, so they diagnosed it as a jarred brain, and they just said, just rest and you'll recover.
Mm,
And so in my 40s, I had to get an MRI because I had had a fall and then hit my head. And they got all excited. And they said, did you know you have an encapsulated cyst in your brain in your right front temporal lobe? And I said,
oh,
and
gosh.
they described it, and I described my experience as a sophomore, and that's probably it. Your brain has healed itself, and you've recovered from that. But back when I was 15, at the time, I lost a lot of my mathematical reasoning, and I had issues with the left side of my body. So I talked my parents into getting me a guitar to help me recover the use of my left hand. And
Mm,
that's when I started playing guitar. And almost immediately, I began writing music. And I've learned maybe 10 years ago, there's a book out. There's a place in the right front temporal lobe of your brain that if you get an injury in that area, you automatically start composing music. It's like it's some kind of a strange little connection
wow.
that you have there. And so, before the injury, I thought I was going to be an architect or a lawyer or, an engineer or something like that. After the injury, I started writing poetry, started writing music, and changed my life. And if I hadn't had that head injury, I never would have met my wife. I never would have done all the things that I've done, and I never would have met all the people who are the most important to me. And
Mm,
so, what appeared to me at the time to be a horrible thing, a horrible event that, why me? Why did this have to happen? Turned out to be a beautiful blessing. And you just don't know. Oftentimes, we're faced with these what appear to be awful experiences, and out of them can come some experiences of really great beauty and truth. And
yeah,
I
yeah.
thank God for that head injury because it led me in a totally different direction in life and helped me to create a lot of really beautiful music.
Yeah, that's so interesting about the music. Um,
Yeah, I'll have to
mm,
look up the name of that book and I'll send it to you. I believe it was a psychiatrist in Eastern Europe that wrote this book, and I was a therapist I was talking to who did EMDR therapy for one of my daughters, and she was telling me about it because
mm,
my daughter also had a traumatic head injury when she was about 16. She fell out of a tree and had a bad concussion, kind of changed the course of her life as well. And so I was talking to the therapist about what happened to me, and she said, that's really there's really an actual condition where people get a head injury in the
mm.
right front temporal lobe and then start creating music. So uh, it's
That's amazing. And the illness thing as well. It's almost like it's puts you on this kind of, yeah, the edge of the veil, really, isn't it? And you can access. Did you find
indeed
that you felt more in touch with um the other realms that you're
absolutely,
experiencing? Yeah.
absolutely. And you know, I've written a lot of poetry and a lot of music, and it's almost like you're inhabited by a greater power, for the time when that inspiration, that it hits. It's as though the muse takes you over, and these beautiful things just come out of you, and you don't even know where they come from. And, my first album, Flower and Sword, the title track is actually an attempt to kind of personify the muse as a woman who bears a flower in one hand, which kind of represents the feminine, intuitive side of creativity, and a sword in the other hand, which represents the linear, mind, the form that the creator takes. And we need a balance of both masculine and feminine in order to really achieve our full potential and to truly be creative as humans. You need both. And so that metaphor has worked for me all my life, and I see a lot more people talking about the union of the divine male and female, and the image of the sun and the moon, which is critical to almost all of my work. I have Flower and Sword. She's the mistress of moonlight. I wrote a play called Silver Apple of the Moon, which is it's kind of inspired by William Butler Yeats' poem, The Song of the Wandering Angus. And it's the story of Antigone from Sophocles, in which really the divine feminine is killed off by the Creon, by the masculine character. And that's the play where I met my wife. Was that. And then I did a piece called Sun and Moon, the Stonecutter's Veil, which is based on a Taoist parable of a stonecutter, which I could relate to because I do the masonry work. He's dissatisfied with himself and his position in life. He sees a wealthy merchant and thinks, "Oh, I'd like to be a merchant." And the life looks a lot better, becomes the merchant, finds that everyone really only cares about him for his money and his power. And he sees an official. Everyone has to bow before the official. So he thinks, maybe I'd become an official. And magically he becomes the official. Then he finds that job is a really difficult one as well. And
I can't hear you. I think the sound's gone, Jim. What's happened?
Is it back yet?
Yep.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So then he sees the sun. He wants to become the sun. He becomes the sun, and his light is blocked by a cloud. So he becomes the cloud. The cloud runs a huge towering stone, and he becomes the stone and thinks he is the pinnacle of power. And far below him, he feels himself being changed, and he looks down, and there's a stonecutter chiseling away at the stone. So the whole parable brings you back to the place where you originally started. And it really is a wonderful metaphor for the journey that we all go through. And so I did that. Then I did a piece called Solomon's Song, which is sun and moon. Again, these images continue to show in all of my work. So, really the balance of the sun, the moon, the masculine, the feminine, these are essential to just about everything I've written, really.
Yeah, we're in a time where the divine feminine is really coming up to the surface at the moment, isn't it? It's really gradually blossoming again and gradually bringing the world a bit more into balance, hopefully, however long that's going to take. But it's 2,000
years of patriarchy has not done us well. If you look at the world, we need the divine feminine now more than ever. And there seems to be tremendous move towards the Magdalene and the Isis and
Yes.
the divine feminine. She seems to be rising and rising strong, and I'm
Mm.
grateful for that.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely feel very led by that through my work and doing this. Yeah, talking to wonderful people like yourself. Um, and just going back to your orb experiences, you shared a really wonderful photo of you when you were playing your guitar, and there's a little in a house, and there's an orb by
Yeah.
you as you're playing the
Mhm.
guitar. I wonder if you can just talk about that, the
Absolutely.
circumstances of that experience.
Yes, I lived for about 6 years in a Victorian mansion that was built around the 1830s, and I rented the servants' quarters from um, the people who had the property. And there was a wonderful antique store in the basement, and the house was full of antiques. And I did a photo session for the play Solomon Song that I mentioned earlier, and the photographer was snapping some pictures of me in the library of the house. And I afterwards he showed me one. He said, "There's something odd in this one. It looks like a little ball of light right between your hands." And I looked at it and I said, "Yeah, it certainly is there. I mean, do you know
Mm,
what it is?" And he said, "I don't know. Maybe it's something on the lens. I don't really know what it was." And at the time, of course, I didn't really know very much about orbs. No one was really speaking about them. We hadn't entered into the age of digital photography where orbs had become a lot more noticeable.
mm,
And so again, I didn't really think too much about it until after I had my other orb experience with my father, and then saw the Oliver's Castle footage, and then had the orbs show up on my artwork.
yeah.
uh, I found the photograph and I went, "Oh my goodness, it looks like there's an orb in this photo." And sure enough, there is. And I think the photographer was using a very high speed film at the
Mhm.
time. But this would have been probably 1984, 85, maybe somewhere around there. I don't know if digital photography had come in quite yet, but it's definitely a
Mm.
distinct orb. And I'll send that photo over to you, as well as some of the other photos of this
Yeah,
work.
I'd
Uh,
love to. I'd love to be able to share that with people.
but
Yeah,
we have a mutual friend, Jane Hunting, who
yes,
has written some marvelous books about her experiences with soul rescue. And
yeah.
she saw the photograph of the library in that
Mm,
house, recognized
mhm,
there were a number of lost souls that couldn't get out of that house. And she has subsequently freed them and
mm,
allowed them to migrate to the other side as part of
mm.
her wonderful work.
Yeah, yeah. I hope to speak to her at some point. She is quite an amazing person.
Indeed.
Um, but I'm just wondering what you feel. What do you feel the orb in that photo was? Do you feel like it was a spirit or an angel or something else?
In that case, I think it may have been a spirit of a departed person who
Mm,
was drawn to the creative energy. I had just finished singing a song, and I was talking about it with a lot of emphasis. I had my hands up, and it just
mhm,
showed like right in between my hands. And Jane said that she maybe 30 lost souls in that house who weren't able to get out. And I think maybe one of them may have been drawn to the light of the energy that I was creating at that
right.
point.
Yes.
And that the those those balls of plasma energy, I
Mm,
think there are definitely some of them represent the souls of people.
mm,
Some of them are angelic, in the origin. And also, I believe that is how the Fae reach us. Sometimes they communicate to us through those orbs. I believe you may have had some experience along those lines yourself.
Yeah, I have experienced them as orbs. I've had experiences with spirit as well. So I think, as you say, it's a complete mix, really. And I know that I quite often see an orb, which is a little blue orb that shows up just out the corner of my eye. And I had a friend stay a couple of weekends ago, very close friend of mine, and she, as we were talking, she said, I hadn't said anything about these orbs that I see. And she said, oh, as you were talking, I was talking about fairies actually. She said a little blue orb showed up around my aura. And I said, well, that's something I see quite a lot. So for somebody else to see it was great confirmation, because you think, oh, I'm just imagining this. And actually for somebody else to say, I just saw a blue orb next to you, I thought, well, yeah, well, I see that a lot. So
I think that it really helps to have someone to confirm some of these types of experiences that we have. So often they are disregarded as a figment of your mind, or something that you saw fleetingly out of the corner of your eye. And the rational mind tends to always try to dissuade you from believing something that can't be explained in rational. In reality, there are like our physical eyes, we only see about 2% of the light waves that are out there. What else is going on that our eyes don't pick up? I think maybe that's the function of our third eye, is to be able to perceive some of these other dimensions and things that are going on around us. And as the third eye is opened up by meditation and spiritual practice, then those other realms become more visible to us and accessible. So you practice meditation yourself, and our light bodies are really more of who we are than our physical body. We tend to think that this material body that we all have and see is all there is to us, but our light bodies are really the framework upon which the flesh is built. And in this way, we resemble God. This is how we're created in God's image, is in our light body. He doesn't look like us. He's light, he's sound, he's vibrating, and all around us. And as these parts of us develop, then that information is accessed, available, and begins to flow through us in a beautiful way.
Yes, definitely. And in relation to your seeing the three orbs over, nature and trees and things, I stayed in a very old cottage a few years ago. And it had an amazing garden that went up the back of the house, and it was full of wildflowers. And I remember the first morning I was there, getting up and going downstairs, and I saw a little white and gold orb just briefly floating by. And I thought, well, that's come through. I just immediately knew that had come through from the garden, and it was nature spirit. Very
beautiful.
Because you just, like you say, you just feel it in your heart, don't you? It's something you just feel. You just know what it is in your heart at the
Indeed.
time.
And that heart knowledge is so much more profound than the intellectual understanding or the perception through the rational mind. It's a knowing that pervades your whole being, and
Yes. Yeah.
you're very fortunate to be able to experience that.
Mm. Mm. And yeah, I just feel that it's my responsibility really to share these experiences and not keep them to myself. And
Indeed, indeed, and
yeah.
I think the human race as a whole, we need to reconnect with the nature spirits and with the elementals and
Mm.
help facilitate the restoration of our planet.
Yeah.
That it's our blind ignorance and arrogance has led us to use the planet rather than work with it,
Mm.
and resulted in all of the horrible things that we see going on, changes in climate now, and flooding, tornadoes, all of those things are amplified. And I think it's really important that we reconnect with nature in a very visceral way. So, and I think nature's trying to communicate that to us. I
Oh,
think a lot of
definitely.
crop
Yeah.
circles and a lot of the things that appear they're symbolic language. Nature is trying to reach us and
Mm.
tell us we need to change our ways. And
Mm.
it just sometimes it seems like no one is really listening. And
Mm-hmm.
we just continue burning fossil fuels. The tundra and the permafrost is thawing, releasing all kinds of methane into the atmosphere. We see 52% of wildlife, flora and fauna have become extinct in the last 40 years.
Mm.
And we need to make extreme changes, and soon, and reconnect with the nature spirits, with the elementals, and with our mother, the earth.
Mm.
She's crying and she needs us. And we can no longer continue down this path that we're on. And I
No.
appreciate you, Claire, and the work
Oh,
that you are
thank you.
doing to bring the world of the elementals into our consciousness and into our awareness. And I feel like you're kind of an ambassador between the fairy realm and ours. And
Oh, thank you.
I love your artwork, and I
Oh,
really appreciate you.
thank you very much, Jim. Well, it's likewise, I think it's such an honor and privilege to meet people like yourself that are on the same wavelength, and all of us together, we have a voice, don't we, to be able to, in any small way, contribute to changing the world. And it doesn't have to be anything huge. It can just be protecting our local environments in some way, or planting a tree in the garden, or
Indeed.
looking after the wildlife. It's all these small things help in some way, don't they?
Yes, they do. They're cumulative, and intention counts for a lot. And the technology that we have today also, I'm very thankful for, because I've gotten to meet people like you and a lot of our friends in the fairy whispering page. And it's remarkable that we're able to hook up this way. And I feel like the Facebook and the internet is kind of a precursor to the natural interweb, if you will, that exists, that I'm hoping we can all kind of tune into and reconnect ourselves in a much more direct way. And
yes.
I've read that in the past, during the age of Atlantis, there was a light grid that covered the planet, and that there were focus points. There were places where people could go to travel using I don't know, some kind of a light grid system, and I think it could be restored. And I thinking these types of things are what will be happening in the new age, that the people will be connected in a much more immediate way, and in a real way. And I think a lot of the work that we are doing right now is preliminary to bringing this about. And
well, I appreciate your time today, Jim, talking to me. It's lovely to meet you in person after chatting with you over the last few weeks in my group and messages and things. So it's nice to see you in person, and makes, like you say, technology makes the world a lot smaller. And appreciate all you're doing as well with your local area, which I'd like to talk with you about some other time if we can, about your special place that you have. So we've only got about 7 minutes left. So
time flies.
Yeah, I know. But is there anything else? You said some lovely things, but is there anything else you just want to say to end on? Anything about your music or any message that you want to share?
Just that we all need to remain in our hearts as much as we possibly can. Our modern life tends to put us all in our heads, where we're thinking. Our head is really good for determining, is it this or is it that? Is it up or is it down? Is it right or is it left? Is it right or is it wrong? It's a constant chattering that's going on. And I think if we all can spend more time in our heart center, we can see how people and all living creatures are deeply connected. And it is through this space where we will reconnect with each other, not feel so isolated, and change the world. And I just would like to thank you for this opportunity to chat and be a part of your podcast. And thank you for your beautiful artwork, because it speaks from the heart to me, everything that I see that you do. And I think this is really the key to human evolution, really, is through our heart center. And I just want to thank you for this opportunity, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Jim, and you too. And thank you for your beautiful music. And
thank you for sharing it.
Enjoying listening to it. It's fabulous. So and I'll put your links under the podcast for people to find out about your music.
Wonderful.
And if you send me some photos, and I can share them with people so they can see what we've been talking about as well. So thank you very much for your time today. I'm going to say goodbye now and stop recording.